I don't.
Sorry, we forgot to turn the recording on at the beginning.
That's a nice way of saying it, Jeff.
We can just try to remember to do that immediately after we.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, Peg, the truth of the matter is I don't know how to do it. And so I just made him co-host, so he's doing it. But I also in the chat said, Jeff, will you please stay after the meeting and show me how? Yes, it's always a problem because I just don't know how to do it. So sorry about that.
And I didn't think about it at the beginning, so. I know there's a way in the Zoom settings to set it so that it automatically records, but I'm not sure that you want to do that on your account. Bonnie.
No.
I just have a record button at the bottom of my screen.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, so that will be exciting, John. It's great. I've been reading it. It's brilliant, as you can imagine. So that's exciting, and
It's better than the first draft. But I mean, it definitely is not informal. I mean, final shape, and I'm counting on some real help.
well, I will look forward to working on it in a week.
Okay.
Not yet.
Yeah.
And so that's very exciting. And our group, Earthful Faith, has been meeting weekly. We have a nice group of people, and I think it's really helpful to me and to all of us. We kind of have a support group, if you know what I mean. It's people are sharing resources and sharing ideas and being together. So I think that's good. And yeah, Ron has been coming. How would you describe our group, Ron?
I think you've described it well enough.
Yeah.
I do know Jay McDaniel had hoped to share with the group some idea about how much work is being done by the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology, for instance, and whether there are ways that we might mesh with some of their efforts to not have to reinvent the wheel.
Yep.
And I think that would be a fruitful conversation.
Mhm. Okay, great. And Charles or Kat or John or anybody, anything else going on or not going on, or we can support you with in any way or anything?
Jeff talked about doodles with his group. Ours is fiddle. I haven't been able to get the artist people together, but I've had plenty of other stuff to keep me busy. So
Well,
Yeah, we've seen some evidence of that. Glad to see all of that.
you want us to tell them what we are doing at noon tomorrow?
well, certainly we've got 3 events coming up with John D. Cobb Jr. in the next few days. For those of you, maybe Peg, we were originally told that the panel with John Cobb and John Perkins would show up tomorrow morning. It's actually going to show on Saturday morning, but I couldn't get a specific time, but got a lot of leverage around that. And tomorrow, John is going to be joining our Planet Earth conversation, and the audience are John Cobb fans that are coming in, which is great. We'll talk a little bit about the origin of Earthism, credited to John D. Cobb Jr. with this little book that I've got a lot of yellow stickies on, where he's been educating me and us. And we'll see how that goes, just a conversation. And then I do believe that any minute now, the Earth Day event on April the 28th will show up in Claremont with the Living Earth Movement URL. We'll see. It takes them a little while to bring those up there, but there's not anything in the area on the map. So that event in Claremont will own that real estate on the international map of the Earth Day event. So.
And I wanted to make sure, so, and I'm going to have to get off at 2:15. So I don't know whether, hopefully we can get everything, we can stick to the schedule. But the next week, that's at 2:00, correct? Does that mean we're not having this one at
No.
1:00?
It's at 1 o'clock next week.
Oh, It's on my schedule for 2 o'clock. My calendar for 2 o'clock. That's interesting.
1 o'clock.
So the LEM large meeting is at 1 o'clock
Yes. The
until
plan is
what?
to always have it on the fourth Thursday instead of our weekly meeting, our monthly meeting with the membership or the
Yeah,
gathering. They'll always be at the same time, 1 o'clock
all right,
or 4 o'clock Eastern time.
right.
Yeah, so why don't we move right into that, John Perkins and John Cobb. So I really love the title, China Enters the Living Earth Matrix. So would you like to just talk about your ideas for that program? And we're excited. Thank you for doing it. And John Perkins will give a talk for about 30 minutes, and then John Cobb and John Perkins will have a discussion, and then we will break into Zoom small groups. And we've talked briefly about maybe just today exploring the idea of the possibility of doing some kind of letter writing campaign from our meeting last week. I thought very exciting possibility of this idea of that there are lots of Americans who are doing business in China. And so rather than trying to talk to the government officials who are doing business or not doing diplomacy business in China, might be easier to talk to Americans and then talk to Chinese people who are doing business in the United States. So that would be a way of having some kind of letter writing program or some kind of citizen diplomacy relationship building between Americans and Chinese and Americans in the business realm. So
Yeah, I think it'd be really nice if we could have, if I don't know how we do this, but get a list of companies that are doing business in China or are very dependent on Chinese products here in the United States, and provide that list and suggest that everybody listening pick one of those companies, or if they want to do it to more than one, fine, but at least one, and start a social networking media blitz with a letter. And I think it would be good, and I actually think John Cobb would be, a very short letter that would be got as an email or a Facebook or Twitter, a tweet to that we can give people to send out. So the company name is left blank, but there might be two different kinds of letter. One is we know you're doing extensive business in China. We really encourage you to help the Chinese company, the entities you're working with in China, to honor the ecological civilization per the Constitution. And the other letter might be, we know that you are a company that's very interdependent with China for either your markets or your products. And same message. Please encourage the Chinese entities that you're working with to honor your country's commitment to an ecological civilization. But I think if we can give people names of companies and a model message, and again, the message needs to be brief, because we know the executives that we're going to be asking people to send this to don't have a lot of time in their day to read emails. And in fact, the email is going to go through a process. Somebody's going to read the email and decide whether it should be passed on to a vice president, and the vice president's going to decide whether it should be passed on to the senior vice president. And so it's got to be brief and poignant.
If it's going to be an email, I suggest no more than 2 paragraphs
Yeah, whatever it is.
to all these people, because I get the same thing. So
Yeah, 2 short paragraphs at that. Yeah, because we know that these people just don't have time to read this stuff.
correct.
Yeah. So, Ron, did you want to add to that?
No, I just have a question about good sources of news from the China side. A lot of our news is kind of more or less Eurocentric or US centric. It'd be helpful to have some news sources that are China centric. Will we have access to something like that? Or a way to encourage people to look at those sources?
Can our two Chinese, that Chinese couple help us with that?
I would think they could.
That would be great, really. I mean, one of the things, I've been on Moscow TV, RTV, and Moscow and Russian podcasts quite a lot in the last 2 weeks.
Hmm.
And I'm really, it's really amazing to me how different their perception of what's happening in Ukraine is from ours, because of we have a very different media. And I'm not convinced that ours is always right. I certainly favor ours, but both sides are presenting propaganda to a certain degree, and we have to recognize, as John often points out, that people like Xi and the same with Putin have to recognize that when they're dealing with the United States, they're dealing with a country that often thinks of them in very negative terms. So, and it's been an experience with the Russian situation, but I think we have a similar situation in China, and not nearly as radical or as drastic, but where the information we receive in the United States is very different from the way the Chinese people are thinking on many issues.
Yep. I've been reading off and on Global Times, which is an English language newspaper out of China that seems, often it seems fairly balanced. Some things are not so much, but it's good to see how they perceive and present news about what's going on, not just in China, but in the world. So,
yeah.
Well, I have the lowest view of the US propaganda. I don't think either of the others is as bad. So I'm entirely in favor of that. Would you like to have Zhe come and meet with us next week? I mean, week after next, and pick up on this conversation?
Yes.
And what information he can provide and what he can't provide, so we would know.
Well, maybe if we could even try to meet with him before next Thursday, so we could have a list by next Thursday. I think that's possible.
I doubt that he has a handy list. I mean, I think that working up this list was going to be a job, but why don't you write him? I mean, there's no reason for me to mediate that and ask him whether he would be able fairly quickly to develop such a list. Well, I will. We were talking. I think last time we were all thinking about encouraging letter writing campaigns of some kind, but we had quite different formulations of what kind. And what at one point in the discussion, I thought I was hearing the suggestion that we try to encourage people in US companies. Well, it doesn't all have to be in business field, but as an example, in US companies to get into a direct communication with someone with a more or less equivalent position in a Chinese company. And that may be too complicated and not be the most important way of proceeding. So I'll just mention that was one possibility, that if there is real understanding between individuals in the two countries of each other, I think that can help in the long run to counter the propaganda of both sides. But that may be less practical than the campaigning to get a lot of messages sent to particular corporations.
Well, just as far as the logistics for the program next week, I don't know what I think, but it sounds like maybe it's going to be too soon to begin letter writing next week. But if we did invite maybe Zaha and May to come to our next meeting in 2 weeks, we can begin to talk with them and think about getting a list together. And then if we're not actually writing letters, if we're going to be a little bit more intentional about who we write to and who writes to who,
Yeah,
that will take a little bit more time. So then the question is, what would you like after your discussion and after your talk, John Perkins, what would you like the breakout room to be about? And is there some kind of action item that we would have for people? We don't have to have an action item, but you understand, just for the program, what would you like it to be?
Well, I had sort of assumed it would be this letter writing campaign, but I think you may be right in that it's a bit too early for that. That might be for, we're going to do this every month or something like this, every month more or less. Is
Yes,
that-
we're going to do a monthly meeting once a month.
Yeah, and
But-
so the next month might
John,
be,
excuse me, John, if you know a few companies who you would really like to see letters written to, I think we could go ahead and get started.
well, yeah, and what I would suggest is that we get our two the Chinese couple that we're so connected with to give us some suggestions as to who they think in China, what companies in China do we have the best opportunity to really affect some actions from, and then what companies in the United States relate to those companies.
Well, okay, I know, I thought some of the letters were going to go to the US companies.
Yes, no, I'm suggesting.
And I think you know enough to get that started.
I don't.
You know,
Frankly.
okay,
No, a few years ago, for example, I would have said Nike,
mhm,
but now Nike's, I think they've switched a lot of their production out of China to Indonesia,
mhm.
and frankly, I haven't kept up on that, so I don't know which one.
Okay, all right. No, I just wanted to be sure if you knew how to get us started, for us to tell you, no, we can't do it, it's a mistake. But if you don't know how to get us started, and we don't know how to get started, I think it'll take a little more time. Yes.
Yeah. So, what would be another action item that we could ask of people? That's the question. I mean, maybe this week it would be enough to tell them that we really want them to spend time understanding and make some references to publications like the one Jeff mentioned, and if we have some other ones that come out of China that people could read to get a more balanced view of what's going on in the world. And we could talk a little bit about how, although we claim to have a free press in the United States, we have to recognize that it's very dependent on politics. And so, for example, I could talk about a friend of mine who was a major reporter for many years for the New York Times and on Latin America. And I asked him one time, well, why don't you tell the truth about some of these movements in Latin America that we're calling communist movements? And they're not communist movements at all. They're grassroots movements that have very legitimate driving reasons. And he said, my editors at the New York Times tell me that they don't censor anything I write. But what I know is that if I write stuff that the advertisers aren't going to like, my editors won't publish it, because if they publish it, then the publisher will fire them or come down hard on them. So he said, the New York Times, although we have a certain amount of freedom but we know that we're controlled by the publishing department ultimately and the advertisers. So he said, I can write that stuff, but it's not going to get printed. And if if I don't get a certain number of articles printed every month, I lose my job. And so I think that's very important for us to recognize that the U.S. press may see itself as free, and some of the journalists say themselves as free, but they know that within certain guidelines, they've got to meet the criteria of their advertisers. They can't pick off
It's
their
not
advertising.
just the advertising, it's also the government.
That's the trouble we had pitching John's book Confessions at the very beginning. I had writers where I talked to, and they were really gung ho on writing about it. And I'd followed up then the next 5 or 6 days and say, how's it coming? You want to book an interview? I took it to the editor and they said, no,
Yeah.
our advertisers wouldn't like that.
Yeah.
Well,
So we do have to be careful.
I have been involved in 9/11 work for a long time, and I can assure you, we do not have a free press about 9/11 at all, period.
In any case, I think that so to give people the opportunity to read what the Chinese people are reading
Yeah,
about what's going on in the world would be a great opportunity. And maybe that's what we want to accomplish next week, is to say, we're going to give you the opportunity here to get some alternative views. And, as I've been writing this book, it's been really, really interesting to me how much I've learned about China. I thought I knew quite a bit anyway, but how much I have learned that we don't here in the United States, that the Africans here and the Latin Americans here and the Australians even here, but we don't, and we get a very different perspective. So I think to offer people the opportunity to get better educated and let them know, and next month we're going to do this ecological civilization, and you should know about what China thinks about the ecological civilization. And so perhaps that's enough for this week, and then plan next week, and then plan next month to hopefully have some names of some companies that that we can start a letter writing campaign with.
Maybe we don't even need to have breakout rooms, or maybe we can, but we don't have to have that. But I am very excited about the possibility of being very intentional and articulating that Living Earth Movement is going to be providing conversation and education on propaganda in the United States and press in different parts of the world, and particularly in China. That's really an important program that we can offer long-term, is that conversation and offering different resources about different media that people can, like you were mentioning, Jeff, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That seems very concrete and important to what we're doing.
Can you put up the agenda for next week? I know you have a tentative agenda. I don't know
I will
whether.
try.
Charles has something he'd like to ask about.
Well, when I saw you put your hand up, Ron, I didn't want to interrupt that conversation, but I went over to the Living Earth Movement website to look for the booklet, and there appeared to be some pretty major formatting issues, Peg. I guess that's something you need to deal with. The page alignment is off. Even when it's downloaded, it's messed up. If we're sending a lot of people over there, we want that to look as professional as possible, I'm sure.
Yes. Thank you. Ron, were you going to say something before?
I was just going to add Philip Clayton as a possible resource on his book on organic Marxism.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know whether that would be a helpful resource.
I thought it was very good. And it does talk a fair amount about China.
well, I think it was really written to fit into the situation in China, and I think it's been influential in China.
Yeah. So, John Perkins, do you think that you would have time, if they're available, to talk with Jiha and May before next week's event and try to get a list of other alternative news sources that people could?
Yeah.
That we could then distribute?
Yeah, I will. I can. I've had these conversations with them, but it might be helpful if you, Jeff, or you, John, just CC them and me, and send an email to them and me, and say that I'll set up a call with them, or I can just go ahead and do it. I'm not sure that would be as effective as if it came from one of you, though. But
Well,
I would. Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, I can of course ask them, but I think that if you ask them, it would have, because you're not constantly asking the things.
Okay,
I
no,
ask them, it's just on a long list.
all right, I will be happy to do it. I'll go ahead and send them an email.
And of course, you can tell them that if they would like to talk to me about it, I'm glad to talk with them. But I don't think I need to be involved.
Okay,
You know,
I
the other
think
thing is
you
that
can make clear what it is we need.
right.
we've also talked about having a Chinese advisory committee that we perhaps meet with once a month. So this maybe could be the first meeting that we have. But can you see this? Did I do
Yes,
it right?
yes,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
This is the suggestion. We can do it however you guys like, but just have an opening and then announcements about different things. And then the John Perkins will give a talk, and then John and John will have a discussion, and then we can just take the small breakout rooms out.
Do you
Yep.
do you have any anticipation of how many people are likely to be on this?
None.
You know, it would seem to me that we might be better off. So if we didn't have the small breakout groups, that would basically give us 35 minutes, 10, 10, and 15 up at the top, right?
Uh-huh.
Maybe that would be just open it to an open discussion with people. Let people.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's a possibility. I'm not saying, it's up to everybody else to decide, but I do a lot of these sorts of things, and it's often very helpful if one person, like say you, Bonnie, reads chats that come in, and we can you can either have people come on live, or you can have them send chats. And an advantage of the chats is then you don't necessarily get someone giving a long dialogue. And I'm thinking of someone like Ron Phipps, for example, might take up the whole 30 minutes.
Yes.
So it might be good to ask people to send in chats with questions, and then you read them.
If Ron is there, I suggest that at a very early point, when you're telling us what we're going to do, you say, no talk should be more than 3 minutes or something like that.
I was going to agree. Yes, I agree.
I would say 1 minute, recognizing that they're probably going to go over, and it's very difficult to stop that process.
Yep.
Ring a bell after 1 minute, and then you ring two bells after a minute and a half or something. Yeah. But I think you anticipate no matter what you say, they don't take that seriously. They add 50% or more.
Right.
Yep. Agreed.
I think this is great. So if Jeff, if you and I can help facilitate that open discussion after, and
Yep.
then that's our program. Okay.
And that's then,
If by any chance 80 people showed up, I would recommend, might still be a good idea to divide. But I think we're much more likely to have 30 people than we are 80. So
Right. But we can up yours, up yours to 30 minutes or.
well, no, I think the open discussion. So are you going to take the invitation?
Oh, right. Yes. I'm sorry. How long will that be then?
Well, are you going to? Does this
25.
rule out then invitations to small groups?
Yes, I think we're.
So you
I
have to
thought
take
you were
another 15
suggesting that
minutes.
we just have the open discussion, and then that can be what, 15 minutes?
Yeah,
10
but
minutes.
what I'm saying, Bonnie, is you still get 15 minutes in the second item for small groups and announcement.
No, that's ridiculous. That can take less than 10 minutes.
So we've now got 35 minutes, I think,
Right.
for open discussion.
That's good.
Yeah, I think that's good.
I'm sorry, how long for this? The open discussion?
35, I think, if we have,
Okay, great.
yeah. And really, I think I only need, I mean, 25 minutes is, I can always take up time, but I don't think it's necessary. I love what the TED Talks do, where they restrict you to 18, because then you really, we all gab too much, let's face it. So I think if you give me 15 minutes and then 25 minutes with John
Okay,
Cobb, and then keep it with 35 minutes, recognizing that there's probably going to be an overrun. So that should give us another 5 minutes or so of wiggle room.
okay. So you want 15 minutes, John
Yeah.
Perkins. Okay. You
Yeah, I
got it.
mean, yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right.
I like to tell people, you know, I do these trips and I do workshops and I go around the room and say, can everybody say something about yourselves? And I think we even notice when we do our own get-togethers that if people restrict it to a minute, most people listen. You tell me something in a minute, I'm probably going to remember what you told me. But if you take 3 minutes to basically tell me the same thing with a few more details, I'm gonna go blank at some point and miss the last minute. And I really think that there's a lot of truth in that we have to be aware of. And I'm probably doing that right now, as a matter of fact.
Well,
I agree with that,
once
John.
we get to the discussion stage, most of us feel like no time restriction.
Yeah, yeah,
I agree with that. They say the same thing about books.
yeah,
But books over 100 pages, hardly anybody reads a book over 100 pages anymore,
yeah,
especially self-help type book. So,
yeah. That's very discouraging,
yeah.
Peg, given my next book, and we keep trying to make it shorter, but we can't.
You need to put a second book there.
You know Steve Fiersanti, he tries to cut it back and he says, but that's too important. And that's my editor, for those of you who don't know him, and Peg knows him well. Yeah, so I think that's good.
Okay, I think maybe we should even try scheduling an advisory, a Chinese advisory committee meeting with Zaha and May, and I hope John and anybody who wants to come, you, Jeff, and you, maybe John Perkins, anybody, I don't know, but it would be good maybe if we could schedule something. John, you're going to invite them, but you understand what I'm saying?
But so you mean not at this 1 o'clock hour, but at some other time?
Right.
Oh, I see. I thought maybe we were going to have.
So I'm going to, let me be clear on this. I'm going to invite them simply to give us information on what sources to read in China in English. They can read it. I guess you can translate any of it, can't you, these days with a Google Translator? Yeah, and that's it. And then we're going to later make a decision about inviting them to name companies and go beyond that. But
and then they'll come to some monthly meeting that we have.
Right, but I'm not doing any of that. I'm just asking them to provide media.
Perfect. But I'm saying in the spirit of that, it would be good to have all of us talk with them. And it's like on my to-do list to find a time, and it needs to be in the later evening. And if none of you want to be involved in that, that's fine. But I hope you will, John Cobb, and Jeff and I will. So that's just something to do. And I think it would be good to, Zaha and May will definitely be a part of that group.
I would like to be involved also.
Okay, good.
Whatever happened to the Chinese person that was going to be on this committee?
That's what we decided. The time restrictions were very difficult because they both lived in Beijing, and that it would be better anyway not to have them as part of this group, is to have a special advisory, Chinese advisory group. So we've invited them to be on that. They've agreed, and Zaha and May have agreed. So it's just a matter of putting it on the schedule. And I think it would be good if we could meet with them once a month. And then there may be others, there may be other, Chinese business leaders that could have, we could invite. But I think the time is now to think about it. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else, Jeff?
I do not.
Well, I think we could maybe start our checkout unless anybody has anything else.
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay.
Do it. So let's have
John Perkins, you are very anxious to check out, so you go first.
No, I'm not anxious to check out. I'm just anxious to stick to the times that we set up.
Yeah, me too.
We might finish early. If we do our checkout expeditiously, we'll finish early.
Yeah, I've said all I need to say. I'm excited about what we're doing. I'm again, I just want to congratulate the two of you, John and Jeff, for that book. I think it's marvelous, and I love you all.
Well, we certainly appreciate having you.
And how are you feeling, Ron Hines?
I'm feeling encouraged.
How about you, Kat?
Yeah, I have to say what Ron said, encouraged. This group is really amazing. I'm so impressed with what's been going on so far.
And Peg?
Great, glad to see some action goals that we can try to elicit at the end of the meeting every week. I think that's extremely important, and that we can get that out to people who are interested so they know that we are moving forward and doing lots of stuff for the Living Earth Movement.
Charles?
Well, I'm encouraged too, but then I am always encouraged. The Claremont event is live on the Earth Day Network map. That means that people are going to be registering and saying they want to attend. So somebody's going to be needing to send a Zoom link once that's set up for the 28th.
Good, good, good. John?
Well, I'm very pleased with the direction things are taking, and I'm especially pleased that I think we're all agreed we want to keep the focus on the US-China relationship. There were a couple of meetings along the way where I felt like things were being pulled in another direction. But there's no one else working on this particular topic. I won't say nobody else, but it's not a widely popular direction. And so I think it's good that we really emphasize it. Thank you. The idea of featuring that on the book. I have a hard time not saying booklet, but I think among ourselves we can say booklet. I think it's okay. That if the booklet features something about US and China, that would be good. I mean the
book, yeah.
The cover of the book.
Oh, the cover, yeah.
What John Perkins was talking about.
Okay. We'll see what we can come up with. Bonnie.
Well, I am really excited, and I really like the idea of the graphic. And if I have your blessing, I have a really good graphic designer who is my church, and I'd like to ask her if she could do something ASAP. And I remember the graphic I loved, which was Biden and Xi, clicking champagne, and it was when Biden was a vice president, I think, but it was very powerful. One image, one picture tells 1,000 words. So something I think would be really powerful. And I'm very excited about the business letter writing potential. Very excited. So thank you.
Since the meeting wasn't recorded last week, I would like to acknowledge again the brilliant insights that Natalie shared with us, that we had been missing, that unique selling proposition of the US-China collaboration. It was, to me, the most valuable contribution of that meeting. We didn't get that recorded either, but I'm grateful that we're moving back in that direction.
Okay. Yes, I think I actually have that photo that you're describing, Bonnie. I'll see if I can find it, and I believe that it's available through Creative Commons. So if I can
That
find
would be great. I love that picture, and especially if it says Gambay underneath.
Well, I think we ought to think about whether we want to have Biden on the cover, because
Yes.
that's going to turn off a whole lot of
Yeah, you're right.
Trump people that we don't necessarily agree with what Trump has to say, but those are some of the people we want to reach. But I think a shadow figure, that's that same picture, but not being specific to show specifically who these two leaders are. And I think we might even say the same would be true of Xi, although I suspect he's going to be in power for a long time, but we don't know what's going to happen with Biden. So I think we got to be a little careful with being specific.
I agree. I think it needs to be more.
Very much like your idea of China and the US kind of coming together on the map, and
yeah, and it could be two shadow figures, one wearing a tie with the American flag on it, and the other one wearing a tie with or holding briefcases with the different flags on them, or something along those lines. Peg's, again, I think we will want to get Peg's input. Once you have a design, I think it'd be good to get her input.
I think, Bonnie, if you think that your designer could do something like that, we should go ahead and try it.
Yeah, well, I'll ask her and, yeah. And we might not like it, but I think just to try something as soon as possible would be good.
Yep.
Yeah.
The main thing is it's simple, doesn't have a lot of words on it. You have the title of the book that's really, really big. And then some graphic. I think that's important. And that's it. Too many covers are too junked up. And
Yep.
so we need very direct and very simple, I think.
Okay.
People and the media.
Well, I'm feeling very good about this meeting and about the direction that we're going in general. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you next week. And it's a,
Yes.
and Jeff, you want to tell them, will they get a link or how is that going to go for next week?
Yes, so we're using the Zoom account from the Cobb Institute, which I think is actually owned. This account is owned by the Center for Process Studies, but it has their Zoom account allows for up to 300 people as opposed to 100 people. So just looking into the future and anticipating that we might get to the point where we have more than 100 people coming on a given monthly meeting. Just for the sake of consistency and not confusing people with having different links, we thought we would just go ahead and use that from the start. So, so I've gotten that from Richard. I shared it with Peg, who's putting it up on the website, and I will include it in the mailing that goes out today or tomorrow.
So we'll get the link
Yeah.
in an email. And if
Yep.
we had any problem, we could go to the Living Earth Movement website and it would be
That's
there.
right. Yes. Is
Gotcha.
that already up, Peg?
No, she's gonna put it up today.
Okay. So yes, you can go to the website, and if you want to send out to your own networks of people, you can send something out and just point them to that page on the website once it's up.
Happy Earth Day, everybody. And we
Earth
need
Day.
to sing, we've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the whole wide world in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands. We've got the whole world in our hands.
All right. Yes.
It's the truth.
All right.
Bye,
Scary.
everybody.
See you next week.
Bye.
Jeff, are you going to stay and show me how to do this? Oh my gosh, he's left.